Well, hello everybody. Today we will be going through how to complete a simple return in our CrossLink 1040 desktop. And we will be covering 8 steps. I call them 8 key steps on what you need to know to get through a tax return within CrossLink. And those steps are filling out our client data, which is covering your taxpayer's basic information, adding your primary forms, such as a W-2, entering your prep fees to make sure we all get paid, determining the filing preference, which is on 8879, checking for any errors within that return, and then we get to our final stages of printing and signing documents, curing a return, and then finally transmitting that return off to the IRS. Okay, so now we should be looking at our work in progress page. This is the CrossLink desktop program for this upcoming season. So we always open up our program to the work in progress page. And we have about 6 cues on here. It kind of guides you through the different stages of that tax return. The main cue I'm going to focus on up on the upper left is a tax return cue. And as you see, it has select the return. And that number will continue to grow. We all want that number to grow because that means you're having all your clients come in and you're preparing a lot of returns. And this number 1 will eventually grow to 50, 100, maybe even 600. So we want that number to always accrue. And then over, if you look to the right, we have our transmit queue. And as you see, I have a 5 there, so that can show that how many returns you have to send off. So that's where we transmit, but I'll cover that later on today. So going back over to our tax return queue, we can hit select a return, or if we look on the top of our yellow toolbar, we have add new. So those are 2 ways you can start a brand new tax return in the program. I'm going to go ahead and select a return. So this way I can also demonstrate how we look up our clients. So once you hit select the return, you kind of get this Excel spreadsheet type of look. And we hit the go button. And you will see I have 1 return in here. And that will load all my clients that I would have for the season. You can also filter by using a drop-down menu if you like to filter by any other settings. But it is default to the last 4 of the social. Or like I said, you could just hit go. And that will load all your clients. I did go ahead and preload a tax return in here. So this way, you didn't have to watch me do all this data entry, but I promise we're going to cover all the steps that we need to. Okay? So now we are in a tax return. We're in Brad Smith's return, and our program opens up to the client data page. So going over a brief overview, we go ahead and we open up to what we call our active window, is what we are currently working in. That's the form that we need to be in to enter information. On our left-hand side, we have attached forms, and that will show you the breakdown of each individual form added to this tax return. Right under where it says a federal amount in green, showing a positive refund, we have the different forms associated with this tax return. Okay, so we could go ahead and we can double click in and out of these forms, as we start to build them to get around to where you may need. So we've covered our attached forms. We covered our active window, which is the form we're currently working in. And then finally, I like to show off our function keys on the yellow toolbar. Okay, the main 4 keys that will get you through a return is over on the top left, add form, verify, which is how we get our error correction, print, how we print our documents and gather our signatures, and then queue. We queue it for transmit. And I'll cover all these buttons as I go through the process, but just, a nice overview of how our program looks. Okay. So now let's get into how we fill out our client data. So we start off with the taxpayer's information, and all the blue fields is what you can edit, what you can enter. That's your data entry fields. Any gray fields, those are calculated fields. So you wouldn't need to enter any information in there. Our program is running those calculations on the back end. So we go ahead, we put in our name, and we can fill out his occupation, his phone numbers, and then we can fill out his email. So, all the basic information that we would need to gather. That's where you kind of gather each taxpayer. And then below that, we have the spouse. As you see, what's really nice that our program offers is like a little hint window, I call it. When you don't know, you look below. And that's showing down at the bottom, we have this gray window or this gray box. And it's telling me email address and then an example of an email address. And that's because that's where my cursor is. And if I move my cursor to occupation, you see that it changes. It just says required taxpayer's occupation. So I am being told what that field is looking for, okay? So if I'm kind of confused, what is this looking for? Best example is a lot of people can say, what is DOD? D-O-D, what does that stand for? The date of the taxpayer's death or date of birth. So you may not know if you have a new preparer what these abbreviations are. You can go ahead, look below, and see what that field is looking for. Going back to that occupation field, if you look below in our gray window, you see the choices button, okay? This choices button will populate from field to field. It has some preloaded data, either our program has entered like dependent codes or cell phone carriers, or you can actually preload data into our database for the program and have your information populate. For example, occupations. Occupations is something you can go up into our database menu and preload occupations that you have a lot of. And for instance, I put teacher, so I can hit teacher, and it will populate in this field. Or if I backspace and I click back into it and I start typing, I just put a T in there, if you can see, and it was already highlighting teacher, and I can hit enter and move into my next field. So it's saving some time in that data entry with some auto population. So that's how we use our choices button at the bottom. Moving on, the next thing, after we get our taxpayers information, we come to this box, and it says filing status. And if you notice, I have a number 2 in there. And I may be asking, how do I get a 2? That's not the general abbreviation. Well, we're going to look below again. And I'm doing a married filing joint return. And it's telling me to enter number 2. So that's how I got my 2. And just a little hint, when you start a tax return, and let's say you just want to start a tax return and go to the W-2 real quick, you always have to enter a filing status first. Okay, so once you enter it, then you'll be able to jump around and go from form to form once you enter that filing status. Moving on, I entered the spouse information. So I just put her name to say she's a stay-at-home mom. They're going to have some dependents. So I have no occupation in there for her. We calculate their address information. Okay. And then we can move on to their bank info. So very, standard information that we require. What's really nice is we have a referral spot on our client data. So you can keep track of your different marketing strategies by entering referrals, marketing strategies that you may offer. For instance, Facebook. We have a mobile app that you can use. We also could do, let's say, radio or word of mouth. So if you want to keep track of what type of marketing strategies are bringing in business, you can go ahead and fill out the client referral type, and you can run reports on that later on. So you can go ahead and see what strategies are working for you this season. And then we finish up with the last 2 things, healthcare and dependence. So we have our healthcare choices here. And I'm sticking, very simple. They received healthcare through their employer. So I mark an X in there. But if, let's say, my spouse, since it is a married filing joint, didn't receive healthcare, I could go ahead and put an X for option D. And then I can apply different types of healthcare coverage for each person I'm claiming on this tax return. So don't think, oh, I can only mark one option. No, you can mark multiple. And to get to the Affordable Care Act forms, you just hit the questionnaire. So these are form links, so you just click on the button and it will go ahead and populate for you. So I'm going to go ahead and delete my X. We're just going to stick with option A, received health care coverage through employer for the entire year. Okay, moving on to dependents. So I added in 2 dependents. So you go ahead and just type in their first name, last name, birthday, and that calculates their age for you. And you enter their social. Again, if you hit on, if I take out daughter, and then I go ahead and I type into it, I can either hit choices, or I could have typed in daughter and it populated. And as you see, now we cover into some things about EIC. So MO stands for months. How many months does that dependent live with you? So I claimed the whole year for both. And then this box is asking me for my dependent codes. And if I didn't know, I can go ahead and look at that choices button as well. And then our abbreviation for EIC code, eligible. And that would change depending on their status for a student, disabled, kidnapped, or none. And then I move into C, eligible for child tax credit. So that the program will automatically populate the C for you if it's allowed. Following up, the last 2 boxes, if I wanted to add a 2441 right away to the tax return, I would just mark an X and that form will populate. And then the ST stands for state use. So these, this box only applies for the grocery credit in Illinois and education credit in Arizona. So you would only, if you're in those states, you would fill out that box. I get the question a lot, what's this box for? Just look below, or it's telling you what states are applied for that. So now that we finished our client data, and just to recap, we took care of our taxpayers' information, the spouse, filing status, their address info, health care, and dependents, all in one window. You're not going in and out of any other windows. It's all taken care of this one screen. And our next step would be to add our primary forms. So to do that, if you're looking at our yellow toolbar, you hit Add Form, and that's our first function key I'm going to cover. And it opens up a window to all the federal forms. And we always default it right there to the W-2. And you can also scroll through and you can add any other forms you would need. So just like a quick overview of all the forms we have in here. Okay. And then, of course, we have these tabs at the top. Federal, all the federal forms. And it says enter schedule form number. So I'm really good with some form numbers. I can go ahead and start typing a number in there, and it will try to bring me to the form I'm getting to. Our index tab is kind of for keyword searches. So you may not know the number of the form, but I can kind of tell myself, they need a child care form, and I don't know the name, but I can start typing child, and it can bring me into there, and it would add that form for me. So that's how the index works. It's kind of like a, keyword search. And then lastly, I'll show the state tab. Once the states are released for the upcoming season, you can filter through the states you need and add the forms that way. So our Add Forms button takes care of all the forms you would need to add to all the tax returns. Okay? So going ahead, now I'm going into our W-2. So Brad, he was a teacher. So this is his W-2 here. Like I said, I preloaded some data into here. But we will go ahead, you'll put in his employee identification number. You would fill out all the information that's on the W-2. You'll put in their wages and their tax withheld. And then again, these boxes are grayed out, so mostly the program is doing those calculations for you. Okay, so you don't have to worry about boxes 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then if there are any other secondary information you need to fill out on a W-2, you could go ahead and enter that info. And once you do that, you can hit refresh. and it will show me my refund amount here. So as you see, my total refund would be $9,400, and it's in green. So that's showing they're getting a refund back. If my refund was in red, it means they owe a balance, and then they would have to pay out. So moving on, we did our client data. I showed you where we go to add forms, and we add our federal forms, run over the basic W-2 entry. And then now, as you see, we're just by doing a W-2, the program populated the schedule for the earned income credit, child tax credit, the EIC checklist, and our prepared due diligence. Those forms will always automatically populate based on the information you have added. And then we're going to go ahead and we could take a look at our 8879. Okay, so going over those steps I highlighted in the beginning, it was filling out your client data, adding your forms, determining how you want to e-file. So that's where we come to our 8879. And right now I'm choosing option 2. Again, at the top it's telling me 1 is a check from the IRS, 2, direct deposit from IRS, 3 is reserved, 4 is a balance due, and 5, if you're offering bank products, you would choose a number 5. And that bank application would add to the tax return automatically. Since the program was just released last week, we don't have that's not built in yet. So I'm sticking with a 2 for direct deposit from IRS. And once I entered that 2, I got this pop-up, refund type. It's letting me know that I need to make sure I collect my preparation fees from the taxpayer. And IRS will distribute the taxpayer's refund. So I hit OK. And then we will go through the 8879, and we fill out the information here. So you take care of your preparer's information, and all that can be preloaded into the program. So once I take care of my e-file form, I want to make sure my prep fees are there. So if you look on our attached forms list, we go to the invoice, and I can double click on it. And if I already preloaded my fees in there for the individual forms, I can see I'm collecting $205 for this return. Okay, so that's where you can go ahead and enter your amount of the fees that you would like to collect for the tax returns on your invoice. So another recap, we did our client data, we added our forms, we went through the W-2, and now we went through the 8879, and I displayed the invoice where we can collect our prep fees. Now we have our checklist. So take a look at the EIC checklist here. Let me open that up for you guys. And here's part 1. So we do have, some boxes that are grayed out. Program automatically enters that information for you. Any of the blue boxes we will have to go ahead and fill out. So I would just read the question, answer the box, yes or no, and we will go through that. Okay, to determine if they receive EIC is up here at the top. Okay, I'm on an EIC checklist, and it says EIC credit is allowed based on the following information. If you don't have anything in the box, you're good to go. Down below, it will show up as a no if they weren't getting any refund from it. Okay, so that's where in this box would be your indicator. Your other due diligence is your prepared due diligence, the 8867. So you just double click on that form, and you will go through your checklist. Just scrolling down so you can see the different parts if you haven't seen it before. Okay, and that's how we wrap that up. So I went through my forms. I got my prep fees in there, determined how they're going to file. So now I'm like, okay, let me see if I've missed anything on my tax return. So our next function key I want to highlight is verify. Okay, so verify brings you to error correction. So I hit on verify, and I have some errors in here. So what's really nice with our program is we have like point and shoot error correction. So once I double click on my error, it's bringing me right to that box. You can see my cursor is blinking right here. And I know I have to mark that. So I go through. And I'm just using the keyboard at this point. I enter an X and I hit enter. And it brings me to my next one. I hit enter again. I go through the questions. And I can, take this all the way through my checklist. It might be easier than scrolling down. So error correction, it's nice that it's bringing you to those errors right away. It's not just telling you this is what's wrong and you have to go looking for it. We're saving you time so you can get the most tax returns done. Time is money. So we want to make sure you guys are getting through these returns. And I can go ahead. And I got nothing here, but let me just go ahead and hit verify again. And this is what we all want to see. It says return verified successfully, and then I can print and transmit. So that means we are good to go with our tax return, and we have no errors. So going with that, I am going to bring up the 2018 software, and I'm only doing that because I don't have the print package available for the new software. So I want to be able to demonstrate all steps for you guys. So I pretty much loaded the same tax return into last year's software. Basic, all the same information. Refunds a little bit off, but that's how it is from year to year. So I'll go ahead and hit verify in this return, and we get the same message, return verified successfully. I'll hit OK. And now we are able to start printing and getting signatures. So going up to our next function key, we go ahead and hit the print button. And this brings up our print menu. So we have a series of buttons here. Now take some time to point out each one of them. Starting off with print just means you're going to print locally into your printer in your office, and it's going to print a hard copy of that tax return. Moving down, we have sign doc and remote sign. Sign doc means that the taxpayer is physically in your office and they're going to sign electronically, either using electronic signature pad, or if you have on-screen signature on your computer or a computer mouse. So they're just signing electronically. So I can hit sign doc, and I can go ahead and populate my signature here for the taxpayer. And if I hit accept, that would generate a full return with their signature. Now, I'm just not going to do that just yet because I want to go through all the buttons. So going back to print menu. Remote sign demonstrates we are able to send either a text message or email to your taxpayer. So let's say they're in another state or they don't want to come into the office. You can say no problem. As long as you have their email or cell phone on the client data screen, you can have what's called a remote sign and sending them a link via text message or email to the taxpayer. They open up the link. They have to sign in. 3 key things: their name, birth date, and last 4 of their social. Okay, so that's how your taxpayer verifies who they are. They have to go ahead and verify the tax return. They review it. Then they're able to populate their signature, and then it comes back to you in CrossLink. So we have multiple ways of gathering your taxpayers' signatures remotely, okay, electronically. So whether they're in office or out of office, they're 2 really good, useful tools to help gather those signatures. Moving down to the last few buttons, deals with email. So first is PDF. You hit the button, it will generate a PDF for you. If you like to save it locally on your desktop or want to send it via your personal email, it just generates a PDF. You have your print preview, and then you have email. So the program recognized that I have an email listed on my client data, and I can email the tax return directly from this program, from CrossLink, to my taxpayer. I would just hit email, and we do encrypt it. So it is the last 4 of your first 4 letters of your name, last name, and then last 4 of your social. Okay? You hit OK, and then it will show up a little email here for you. And you can even send the attached password to your taxpayer, so they'll get a separate email saying this is your password to log into your tax return. And then you would just hit OK, and the tax return will be emailed to the taxpayer. So again, very useful tools to being able to send tax returns remotely to your taxpayers. Okay. So going, just to recap how we gather those signatures. Sign doc, physically in your office using a signature pad. Remote sign, sending a text message or email to gather their signatures. And then lastly, you can email the tax return directly to your taxpayer using the email button. So once I have gathered my signature, so let me go back. I'll hit sign doc. Go ahead and populate something here. I'll hit accept. And now it's asking for my spouse. So I'll just put something in there, accept. And then as you see, it's asked me for my ERO signature. So the ERO signature is not populated on this return. Definitely something CrossLink's able to do, so you don't have to worry about printing and signing manually. You can just go ahead and put in a lovely signature in here, hit accept, and then it will formulate that tax return for you here. Okay, just to scroll through, I'll be able to show the signatures for you. And let me get there. This year, we are actually able, one signature. Here is my ERO signature right here, is going through, and you can get one signature and it will populate on all areas of the tax return. Okay, so one signature, so one remote request or one local signature will now carry forward for the entire tax return and bank documents. So you don't have to worry about sending multiple requests for that. Okay, so here's my signature, here's my spouse's signature, and then the ERO signature. So it populates nicely in a return, and then I can go ahead and I can save it or email it. You can do what you may with the tax returns, but this is how it generates. Okay, so I closed it out. We're back in the program. So I signed it. I would have printed it out or emailed it to the taxpayer, and now I am ready to queue my tax return for transmit. So going over the last function key is queue, right next to verify. So I hit queue, and it's telling me here is my tax return, my federal package, the refund, and then what kind of file, direct deposit. And just make sure this box here is checked mark. If it's not checked marked, it's not going to queue. So we want to come in and check mark it. And if you had a state return, you would do the same as well. It would say queue state, and it would show all the information. Okay, so you just have to check mark both boxes. And we hit queue. And now it brings me back out to my client lookup screen. Okay, and the reason it does that is because you're done with the tax return, and technically our next step would be to transmit. Okay, there's a few areas where you can transmit. On your client lookup screen, I can transmit right here on my yellow toolbar. Or if I hit the WIP button, which means work in progress, which is my landing page when you open up the program, I still have transmit on my yellow toolbar, but then I also have transmit to central site. They both do the same thing of opening up that transmit window. Okay, so here's where we would hit transmit. And if I hit filter just to demonstrate, you see that tax return in here. Okay, so you can see all the tax returns you have preloaded in here to transmit for the day. And hopefully there are many in there for you guys. And you can go ahead and make sure they're selected, hit OK, and you would hit transmit off to the IRS and our servers. So that is how we complete a tax return from beginning to end within CrossLink. So just going to go ahead and bring up that PowerPoint to go ahead and do a little recap. We have the 8 key steps for how we complete a tax return. Our first step is filling out our client data, composing of all the taxpayers' information, their health care, and dependents. Then we add our primary forms, such as the W-2, Schedule A or Schedule C, and so on. We make sure we enter our prep fees for collecting our money on the invoice. We determine how we're going to e-file on the 8879. And then we do our verify for errors. We hit verify, go through our error correction, make sure we get it all good. And then we can print and sign documents. Queue our return. And finally, we transmit our return off to the IRS. And like I said, if you can remember this order of steps to complete a tax return, you'll be in really good shape for season, because you'll just remember these are the order of the steps you have to go through to finish a return in CrossLink. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for listening in on today's webinar. Thank you for everybody for attending, and I hope you guys all have a great tax season. Good luck.